Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 3 of the LolFish podcast. I'm Lambo Fish, and I'm joined by Locale Central. Today, we have many different topics that we're going to be talking about with you guys today, from the MLB to the NFL to the NBA, and of course, college football. So, why don't we get started with talking about some MLB free agency and the manager moves that we have seen so far during the winter? I think the first one, obviously, that I want to talk about, because being a Brewer fan, is the loss of Craig Counsell going to the Cubs, and then the Brewers signing bench coach Pat Murphy. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I mean, obviously, I think Craig Counsell is the best manager in baseball, and he should have won a couple Manager of the Years, I would say. But um, people are greatly divided on whether or not it's Craig's fault or Mark Adanasio's fault. And where are you on that?
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely leaning more towards Mark Antanasio's fault, because I'm one who, as you know, I will complain about team payrolls across the league. And I feel like Craig Counsell has done a pretty good job with what he's been given, what he's been able to, work with. And for them to, make the playoffs for the last couple of years in a row, or at least be close to the playoffs, he's done a pretty good job. And I like what you said. I do think that he is one of the better managers in the league. And, I mean, apparently the Brewers had offered him a contract, but the Cubs just offered him more. It sucks that he's going to the Cubs, as the Cubs are one of the Brewers' rivals, But I think that if just Mark Antanasio would open up his pockets a little bit
Yeah,
in
because
terms of both, you know, team salary and paying Craig Counsell.
so all you have to look is that Jesse Winker is getting paid more when he was on the team. And look what he did. He didn't do jack.
Yeah, Jesse Winker was definitely not great.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is people are just upset that he did go to the Cubs. But you have to kind of think it works out for Craig. Because I think his kids are playing like sports in like Whitefish Bay. And, he's close to home. He can just drive up there whenever he has to.
Right. And again, like I said, I liked Craig Counsell. I liked what he did. But I mean, what are your thoughts on them just deciding to sign their bench coach and Pat Murphy? Do you think, that's a good fit, or do you think that they should have maybe went after somebody else?
Um, I wanted them to go after Don Mattingly, but it makes sense with staying in house because, he knows it's probably going to remotely stay somewhat the same. The tendencies and whatnot, play calling, because he's was there for all that, but I don't know. He knows a lot of the ins and outs of Brewer baseball, so
Yeah, he knows a lot of the players, the management. Having been there like you, I had also wanted Don Mattingly. I thought that he would have fit well here, but I'm okay with it. Obviously, we'll see how he does this coming year with the team that he's going to get. But honestly, I'm okay with it. And they ultimately decided to hire Ricky Weeks to kind of become that bench coach that fill the Pat Murphy's role. And honestly, I kind of like that too. And some people have said that maybe they were kind of training him up to kind of be the next head coach, or the manager, I suppose, um, of the Brewers. And I wouldn't mind that either. But I mean, we'll see how it works out going forward. And, honestly, right now I'm kind of okay with it.
Something that would probably be a Brewers fan's wet dream would be having Ryan Braun as manager, but I don't think he'd ever consider it, to be honest.
Yeah, I kind of wondered myself, like, why he hasn't become a coach of some caliber on the Brewers. But I mean, ultimately, maybe he just doesn't want to. So, you know, I suppose, I'm okay with Ricky Weeks if they decide to ultimately go with Ricky Weeks in the future. Who knows? Pat Murphy may turn out to be one of the better managers in the league. You just don't know right now. But if they are ultimately giving Ricky Weeks that role to train him to become the future manager, I'm totally all right with it. I mean, obviously, he may not be that big of a name, but he's just got to work his way up to that.
Yep, for sure.
So, in terms of other teams who have decided to hire new managers this offseason, some being the Astros, who decided to go with Joe Espada, who was previously their bench coach. We saw the Guardians decide to go with Stephen Vogt, who had recently retired. The Mets go with Carlos Mendoza, who was a former Yankees bench coach. And we also saw the Padres decide to go with Mike Schlitt to replace their manager. So, any of these that you would want to touch on that you thought maybe were surprising or good signings?
I mean, a couple that I think are kind of uh, maybe unfortunate could be the Guardians, because Terry Francona was so good, but he had health issues, so it is understandable. And the Mets going in a different direction from Buck Showalter, which kind of makes sense
Mm,
because they were so, you know, not all that great with the highest payroll.
yeah, yeah, they did. They did definitely underperform.
But can you really blame that on the manager? Some of it, but a lot of it I think is just the players that they got didn't fit their system.
Yeah, I think they just spent a lot of money on players that didn't really produce.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's not all on the manager, but to be honest, a lot of the finger pointing starts at the managerial position. So, they look at managerial, they look at general manager, they look at stuff like that kind of first. So sometimes it may not be entirely their fault, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, you can't cut the entire team, so you go to them first to try to fix it.
Now let's get into some signings, which have been uh, kind of the talk of the town with a lot of these signings and trades that we will eventually get into here. Some being the Cardinals. They looked at adding some pitching help this offseason, signing Sonny Gray to a 3-year, $75 million contract, Kyle Gibson to a 1-year, $12 million contract, and Lance Lynn to a 1-year, $10 million contract. So they went the direction of ultimately trying to bolster their pitching rotation, which I think they kind of needed to do.
Yeah, for sure. Their pitching was pretty bad during the season, and I think the best signing is Sonny Gray. He's been an all-star with 3 different teams, so it this might be his fourth team. Who knows?
In terms of other teams who have decided to make some moves this offseason, one being the Giants, who signed former KBO MVP Lee Jung-ho, who signed for a 6-year, $113 million contract. And I apologize if I butchered that name, but and the Phillies decided to bring back their ace, Aaron Nola, on a 7-year, $172 million contract. And of course, some other notable signings before we get into some of the bigger signings of this offseason were Jamer Candelario, who signed for a 3-year, $45 million contract with the Reds, Lucas Giolito, who signed a $38.5 million 2-year contract with the Red Sox, and Eduardo Rodriguez, who signed a 4-year, $80 million contract with the Diamondbacks.
I really like the Eduardo Rodriguez deal. The Diamondbacks probably need more help at pitching than what they had because they were starting rookies in playoff games. So getting a veteran presence like that will help them a lot.
Yeah, and before we decided to start the recording, you had mentioned that you were not a fan of the Aaron Nola contract.
I mean, he's a good pitcher, but 7 years might be a little too much for someone like that because he had a down year last year. A down year on a team that won 90 games. Like, we know what he can do, but I'd say besides 2018, he hasn't really. He doesn't get many wins, which I get wins are a team stat, but his ERA is always somewhat high in the fours,
Mm,
threes.
yeah, I was gonna say usually it's maybe in like the low fours type area.
So if he stays a Philly that entire length of the deal, he'll be there till 37. So he'll be pretty old when it's done, and we'll see if it's worth it. Like, he strikes a lot of guys out, but nowadays, anyone can do that in this high strikeout
Yeah,
league.
yeah, I think it was kind of important for them to, bring back their ace. They're obviously, you know, trying to make it to the playoffs and do well in the playoffs, and I think kind of that first step is bringing him back. It's the money wise, we'll have to see. Like you mentioned, you know, last year was kind of a down year, so we'll see if he can bounce back. But I mean, I like Aaron Nola, and I think it was important for them to bring him back, especially, they're trying to contend. But, you know, like many of these signings, we'll have to wait and see how they pan out. 7 years is a long time. And by the end of that, he's going to be older. So, we'll see. Will he be able to, stay where he's at? Will he improve? Will he decline? Those are all questions that will be answered in the years to come. Now let's go into detail on the Dodgers offseason so far. Everyone wants to talk about, and that's Dodgers breaking the bank. They signed Yamamoto to a 12-year, $325 million contract, Ohtani to a 10-year, $700 million contract, and more recently, Teoscar Hernandez to a 1-year, $23.5 million contract. Now, the details on that Ohtani contract calls for $2 million annual salaries and $680 million of deferred money each year without interest to be paid in $68 million installments between 2034 and 2043. Now, obviously, that part right there is the big thing that a lot of people are talking about. I know the Yamamoto contract, there's no deferred money in that, but I know the Teoscar Hernandez contract, I think it's like $8.5 million of it is deferred until later on. like in a couple years or whatever for that one. But what are your kind of opinions on the Dodgers and taking this approach? Like, would you say it's a loophole? Would you say it's bad for the league? Should should this be stopped? Should this be something that should be taken into consideration as being stopped or having a cap put on it? Because right now there is no cap to the amount of money that teams can defer money. So, what are your kind of opinions on some of these things?
I think it's perfectly okay. The Dodgers are just the only team going out and doing it. Because with the deferred money, I believe that that is in there for the smaller market teams to be able to give out bigger contracts to stars. The Dodgers are just using it to put out more money for guys. And it's smart managing, if they're able to compete, stack up their team for this year, and even if they win one World Series, all of these moves were worth it. Doing all that, deferring all the money. And with Ohtani, with Shohei, it's, he's making a whole bunch of money off of, investments and, you know, all these other things in Japan that he doesn't really need it all right now. So I don't really see an issue with deferring money like that because, we had foreshadowing of this happening before with the Bobby Bonilla, Chris Davis. It's just all happening all at once now. The only reason people are upset
Yes,
is
but it
because of
wasn't.
big teams doing it.
Well, a lot of that too. It wasn't. We haven't seen anything this big amount of money like that. I mean, in 2034 from to 2043, for them to be paying $68 million a year to somebody who's like not even on their roster anymore. Like for
And
example, that $68 million is like say half of the Brewers team payroll. So I think that's like kind of like what a lot of people are, kind of complaining about.
are they allowed to defer that money even more in the future? Or is it all set in stone?
I
Because
mean,
if they
personally, I
cut
don't know.
that
I would
up,
think that it's set in stone.
if they cut that up even more, they will if they can. But I don't think it'll bother them because they're gonna make half of that money back just this year with Japan. All of them buying Dodger jerseys and whatnot. They're gonna make a whole lot of money, so they'll make it back in a couple years. So that won't be anything to them.
I don't know. I think me personally, I'm somebody who would vote in favor of there being some kind of cap to the amount of money that can be deferred. Because, if the Dodgers are doing it with Ohtani, what's stopping, the Yankees doing that in the future or the Mets doing that in the future with other star players?
They will. It'll happen in the future. But I don't think the players union or whatever will allow them to place a cap on this.
Well, I mean, I think it would take a lot of discussion for something like that to happen, obviously, because, first you have to, do we want a cap? Yes or no? Okay, well, what do we want that cap to be? And what are the penalties for if somebody, goes over that or, like stuff like that.
Like,
But
would you be in favor of, you know, them being allowed to defer as much money as they want, but they have to pay more money if they choose to do it? Kind of like what they have now. Instead of an actual salary cap, have like a luxury tax almost. Because I think that's all the only thing that they'd be allowed to do if they put it in.
I think something like that would help, but I don't know. The luxury tax for a lot of these owners, like that luxury tax isn't nothing. Like they're gonna go over the threshold, and then they're gonna be okay with paying that luxury tax because they can. They just want to go out there and do whatever they can to, build a championship team, and whether that's having to pay the luxury tax in the end, these owners are just gonna do it. So, I mean, how much of the impact will that actually have on a team, like preventing a team from putting out $680 million in deferred money over a certain amount of years? More people are complaining about it because it is a big market team and a high, payroll team that's doing it. And like how I had mentioned, how, what's stopping the Yankees, what's stopping the Mets, and you saying, oh, it's going to happen, and it will happen. I mean, for example, Trout, it could happen with Trout when he's up for a new contract or whatever. It could happen with, a lot of these young stud players who are going to be up for contracts, and these big market teams are just going to say, well, here's 5 million, per year, and in 10 years we'll pay you, 70 million a year or whatever. Yeah, in my perspective, I just think it's a loophole, and there should be some kind of restriction on it, but I don't know. I just think that being able to defer large amounts of money like that is just insane. But like, I mean, they can do it though. That's the thing. Like they can do it. There's no rule against them not being able to do it. So like it's not like they're breaking any rule or anything. Like they're allowed to do it. It's just nobody has done it to this magnitude. Well, in terms of sticking with the Dodgers, let's kind of talk about some trades that have happened during the off season. One being the Dodgers going out and adding Tyler Glasnow and Manuel Margot for right-handed pitcher Pepiot and outfielder Johnny DeLuca.
Tyler Glass now is really, he's a stud. He was good on the Rays, and we'll just have to see if he can stay healthy and help the Dodgers win a title in the future.
The Dodgers have looked to add to their outfield depth. I know they had we didn't talk about it, but I know they had also signed Jason Hayward this off season. So, and again, they're making additions to their starting rotation. We know that Shohei won't be pitching this year, so for them to go out and add a Tyler Glasnow, I think that's good for their rotation, good for improving their rotation, especially with right now not having signed Clayton Kershaw, which I think that would be kind of interesting to see if they will go out and re-sign him. And also Julio Urias, the Braves decided to go out and add a 7-time All-Star and give him an extension, trading for Chris Sale, giving up Vaughn Grissom in return, and then ultimately they ended up signing Chris Sale to a 2-year, $38 million contract extension with the Braves, with an $18 million club option for the 2026 season. I know you're a big fan of Chris Sale, so what are your thoughts on that trade for the Braves?
I think that it's a good deal. The only thing that could be, detrimental in them acquiring Chris Sale would be his injury history. But a lot of his injuries recently have been freak injuries that he didn't really have any control over. He got hurt on a dirt bike, and then he broke his hand on a comebacker. So it's not like he blows his arm out, on the mound every other time. So I think if he can stick around and, help them win games, we're going to see a Chris Sale Hall of Fame bid because he's almost at 3,000 strikeouts. He has like 2,200, I think, something around that. And he's a high strikeout guy. He's a power pitcher. He'll get those guys out. And I think it helps them because if, their other guys get injured, they got rid of Kyle Wright. So, yeah, next guy up, really.
Yeah, I think this could end up being a pretty good trade for the Braves. Like you said, if the big question mark is Chris Sale's, injury history. Those have kind of hindered him the last couple of years, but I mean, he is a 7-time All-Star. So, we know that he has All-Star stuff. So, I mean, he could end up being a very good pickup for them, even if he's like not necessarily great, but he's good or just average. That could be a good pickup for them, especially having a guy of his experience in the postseason if he's healthy. I think that could add a lot to this Braves team, who a lot of people say are one of the World Series favorites. So I think this signing with the extension and the trade to ultimately go and get him could be very helpful for them.
How do you feel if that? Because a lot of people online are saying that he should come out of the bullpen and be like a closer. I don't think they would do that, at least at first, unless he just started getting hurt a lot because of the amount of money that he is making. How do
Yeah,
you how do you
when you
feel about that?
right when you asked me that question, I was thinking like at least not right away. Now you throw him into starting rotation. If it's not really working out, if he's if he's like dealing with some like smaller injuries here and there, maybe you make the transition to put him in the bullpen. But I would at least start him as a starter and see how that goes. If not, then maybe you look at adding him to the bullpen. Maybe you know, make him long relief or the setup guy, or if you want to bring him in some closing situations. But at least to start, I would put him in the starting rotation. All right, some other trades. Obviously, one of the bigger ones that has been kind of overshadowed by the Dodgers' moves this offseason, but the Yankees decided to make their own splash this offseason by going out and trading for Juan Soto. And obviously, along with that comes Trent Grisham for right-handed pitchers Michael King and Johnny Brito, and minor league right-handed pitchers Drew Thorpe and Randy Vasquez, and catcher Kyle Higashioka. Along with that, they also decided to trade for Alex Verdugo, giving up right-handed pitchers Richard Fitz, Greg Weissert, and Nicholas Judas. So the Yankees decided this offseason to make their own splash, like I said, going out and trading for Juan Soto. How do you think Juan Soto will fit with the Yankees?
I think it's a great deal if they can, extend him, which they want to, because they don't want to give up all that just for 1 year of Soto. I think he'll help the team a lot, and I do believe the Yankees will have a bounce back year, as last year with Judge getting injured and everyone, basically the entire team, having a down year at the same time. I think they can do a lot better than what they were. And I think the biggest question mark for them will be pitching. So I think their offense will do a lot better this year.
Yeah, I think Juan Soto will be a great fit for them. I think he's absolutely going to mash for them this year. Offensively, I think they're pretty decent. They're pretty good. I think obviously their big question mark would be pitching. So, but in terms of trading for Juan Soto, I think that's a great move for them. I think it's you know improves their offense, and even adding Alex Verdugo, who you know usually has a pretty high batting average. So I mean I like Verdugo. I have him. I play fantasy baseball, and he's on a lot of my teams. Uh, but I think those are pretty decent moves for them to go out and make. I'd like them to sign some pitching to help improve that rotation and even the bullpen. But I think Juan Soto, especially if, like you said, they could sign him to a contract extension, I think it'll be a really good move for them.
I think the Trent Grisham will help too, because at the end of games they can, stick him into the outfield, and because he's a Gold Glove player, he's great at defense and he can hit when you need him to and pinch hit positions. So I don't think that's bad for them either.
Yeah, and more recently here, the Giants and the Mariners just recently had a trade where the Giants add former Cy Young winner Robbie Ray, giving up Mitch Haniger and right-handed pitcher Anthony Desclafani. Robbie Ray recently, hasn't been that great, but I mean, he is a former Cy Young winner. Again, kind of like with Chris Sale, who has proven that he can be a great pitcher. We'll see how it works out for them. If Robbie Ray can kind of, get back to his Cy Young self, this could end up being a really good move for the Giants.
Yeah, we'll have to see what he's able to do coming off of injury. He's 32 years old, so we'll have to see. It could be a very good pickup. I liked him a lot when he was with Arizona. He did really good with Toronto, decent with Seattle in the first season, but you never know. He could really be great for him.
All right, so wrapping up with the MLB, let's move on to the NBA now. The NBA season has started. We saw the in-season tournament, the first ever in-season tournament, take place where the Lakers ended up beating the Pacers 123 to 109. We saw the Lakers hang up a banner for winning this in-season tournament. So just kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit on your thoughts of how the in-season tournament went.
I mean, I don't have an issue with it. It gives them something else to play for more money, and it really helps out the players that aren't on big contracts. That could be rookies or guys on two-way deals and stuff like that. So it helps out quite a bit.
Yeah, I actually, kind of enjoyed the in-season tournament. Being a Bucks fan, the Bucks were in the actual tournament in Vegas, and I thought that it was entertaining. I thought that it kind of made the games, mean a little bit more, and I enjoyed it. I wouldn't really complain about it, and I'm excited to see, the future of the in-season tournament. I just think it just adds more to the season. It adds more to the games, and I like that. So now that the NBA season has started and we are a decent amount of games in, that's going to come with some disappointments and some surprises. Some of the teams who, maybe not off to the best of starts, and some teams who may be off to a great start. Now, some of those disappointments that we have picked out here is the Warriors, who are currently 17 and 19 and 11th in the Western Conference. The Lakers, who are currently 18 and 19 and 10th in the Western Conference. The Suns, who are currently 19 and 17 and 9th in the Western Conference. And the Hawks, who are currently 14 and 21 and 12th in the Eastern Conference. Now, see, these are some of the teams that kind of right now we had thought were underperforming a little bit. At least their record had showed that they were underperforming, or their position in the conference kind of showed that they were underperforming. Now, in terms of surprises, some teams that we had picked out were the Magic, who are currently 21 and 15 and 4th in the Eastern Conference. The Pacers, who are currently 20 and 15 and are 7th Eastern Conference. The Timberwolves, who are currently 25 and 10 and 1st in the Western Conference. And the Thunder, who are currently 23 and 11 and 3rd in the Western Conference. Now, out of these teams, what team, and either the disappointments or the surprises, kind of surprises you the most that they're in that category?
Uh, for disappointments, I would probably go with either the Suns or the Hawks. The Suns have had, you know, Kevin Durant's been injured on and off, so that's a big reason on why they have so many losses. But the Hawks, everyone expected them to at least, be in the playoff hunt, and they're nowhere near that. 14 and 21. They're gonna need to start winning games and start winning them soon, because I saw a lot of reports of DeJounte Murray trade rumors, and I don't know if I'd blow up the team, but I would, do something. You got to, if you want to make sure this season is something that you can play for.
Yeah, to just add on to like what you were saying about the Suns, Bradley Beal has been another player who has been like on and off the IL for majority of the season so far. And I kind of agree with the Hawks. The Hawks a couple of years ago were, they were like in the Eastern Conference Finals. But I think one of the most surprising teams to me this year is the Warriors, and how they're like currently 11th in the Western Conference. They still have Curry, they still have Clay. I know they had Chris Paul, but Chris Paul, just got hurt. Wiggins, and now there's all these like rumors that I think it was Jonathan Kuminga who like was questioning Steve Kerr and doesn't feel like Kerr would allow him to get to like his highest potential. And all these things with Draymond being suspended, and it's just that's one of the more surprising ones to me, because they're still the Warriors. They still have a lot of the key players from the last couple of years, but they're just not performing on the court.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is it's there's a whole lot of issues over there. Like you said, with Draymond getting suspended and Chris Paul getting hurt, but I think a lot of it is them just trying to hold on to the past, because like Clay is a good player, but I don't think he should be used the way that they're using him. I don't think he's like an everyday player anymore. You could make the claim that he's washed up. He still produces, but I don't think he can be like the second option on a team anymore. He should be third or fourth, maybe. But Draymond is, I don't know. if you can't stay on the court, you just try to fight everyone all the time. You shouldn't be playing in the NBA anymore. But I don't know. We'll just have to see if they can turn it around.
Yeah, and obviously, it's still very early in the season. A lot of these teams could turn it around, and even the surprises right now could completely do a 180. It's still very early. I assume adjustments are going to be made. Things can happen. Injuries, trades, just cold streaks, hot streaks. Anything can happen with any of these teams. But in terms of surprises, one of the more surprising teams for me this year would be, I mean, we got to talk about the Timberwolves and the Thunder, to be honest, because the Timberwolves right now being first in the Western Conference and the Thunder being third in the Western Conference, I think is, not something that many people probably had expected from those teams.
Yeah, I'm a big Anthony Edwards guy, and he's playing a huge role in you know being the main guy on that Timberwolf team and being a leader for being someone that is as young as he is, and especially with the supporting cast that they have. Rudy Gobert is playing a whole lot better this year than he did when they first got him. People were talking about whether or not that's the worst trade in NBA history, and he's he's balling out. Karl Anthony Towns is playing a lot better, and you know a lot of their lower tier guys like Mike Conley, he's a little older, but he's playing really good over there too. So we'll just have to see what if they can keep it up.
Yeah, and speaking on the Thunder, man, the Thunder are going to be a team to look out for is now and in the future because they got Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren. They have many young pieces, and they're loaded in first round and second round picks for years to come. So they're in an amazing position right now, and they're going to be a team that in the next several years should probably be finishing in the top of the Western Conference, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
Just
agree.
with the amount of young players that they have and the draft capital that they have, if they really wanted to, instead of having 3 first round picks this coming year or whatever, they could trade those first round picks for later first round picks. They have a ton of leverage that, you know, if they can, now it all depends on if they can use those picks to, they could use those picks and those players might not work out. It just happens. It is that way sometimes. But if they can hit on a lot of those picks and a lot of those picks become, great, good, great, stud players, superstar caliber or star players for them, and on top of, if they can keep Gilgeous-Alexander and, Chet Holmgren and they can keep improving and, playing at the caliber that they're playing at, I think that the Thunder will be one of the teams to beat in the future.
Yeah, I think what they should do with a lot of those picks, not all, but they should think about trading those picks for someone that is a superstar. Like, they don't have to rush their, you know, resurgence now. They can keep playing it slow like how they have been and develop these guys. But they have a lot of options with those picks that they can choose
Yeah,
to do.
yeah, that's another thing too. Like how I was saying with how if they don't want the whatever 3 first round picks or whatever they have in this year or whatever, they could trade 1 or 2 of them this year and get first rounders in the next couple years for those picks, or they could use those picks to trade for somebody who's already proven to be a star or a superstar, or they could just use all their picks themselves. They have many different options that they can do with these first round picks. And for them to be third right now in the Western Conference and to just, be a young team and to have all that leverage in the future, that's they've set themselves up almost perfectly.
For sure, they're going to be a team to watch out for.
And kind of keeping on the topic of the Thunder and Chet, let's kind of talk about Wembanyama versus Chet Holmgren. And obviously, those two are probably the front runners for Rookie of the Year. Chet so far this year for the Thunder, obviously we talked about their record, currently 23-11 and third in the Western Conference at the time of this recording. Currently, Chet this year is averaging 17.4 points per game, 7.4 rebounds, 2.6 assists. He's shooting 54.3% from the field, and from three-point, he is shooting 39.6% with also 2.6 blocks and 0.7 steals. For Wembanyama, the Spurs currently are 5-30 and 15th in the Western Conference. Wembanyama himself is averaging 19.3 points per game, 10.1 rebounds, 2.8 assists. He's shooting 44.9% from the field, 29.5% from three, averaging 3.3 blocks and 1.2 steals a game. Now, you had kind of mentioned something here that you kind of maybe wanted to talk about with thoughts and issues with the Spurs not passing to Wembanyama.
Yeah, in San Antonio, a lot of people expected them to get Wembanyama and possibly make a playoff push, but that is pretty unrealistic. With you don't have a team filled with 19 and 20-year-olds and expect them to go out and beat teams filled with grown men. It's not going to happen. But something that is quite interesting is Wembanyama is way over 7 foot. You could be doing alley-oops to him all the time, and he's cutting towards the basket wide open, and they don't throw to him. They just take the shot. So either that's possible jealousy among guys, or it's just low basketball IQ because of how young they are. And you can see that in a player that I really like, Keldon Johnson. His assist numbers have gone down. The whole team's assist numbers started to go down. So whether they're all playing for themselves or for the team remains to be seen. It could just be them trying to gauge, whether or not they're a good fit. But we'll just have to see, because I don't know, the team is pretty much the same as last year, except they have Wembanyama, and they lost a whole bunch of games. I think it's just an issue of how young they are, and they need to mature, and I think Pop will be able to do that with them in the next couple of years.
So now, in your opinion, who would you say right now would be the front runner for Rookie of the Year?
Easily Victor Wembanyama. He leads in all the stats against Chet except field goal percentage. And Wembanyama leads the entire NBA in, block average, 3.3. So you can say that's how tall he is, but guys like Bol don't do that. It's just because of how good he is. But you have to think about it. If you switched them, why is Chet's efficiency so good? Because he isn't the first option on a team. If he was on the Spurs, his shooting percentage would go down because he'd take more shots than what he does right now. And if you put Wembanyama on the Thunder, their stats would probably reverse. But I think it's Wembanyama's to lose. He'll only lose it if he gets injured.
I don't know. For me personally, like right now, I would probably give my vote to Chet, just with how, I mean, he's playing pretty good so far this year, and with how the Thunder are, doing so well so far this year, I would give it to Chet. I obviously can see an argument for Victor Wembanyama. I think obviously it's going to be between these two, and we're gonna have to see how the rest of the season develops. Injuries could happen, or players may start, not doing very well. Could go on a cold streak, and that could determine a lot. But I don't know. Personally, for me, I would vote with Chet being so far Rookie of the Year.
Well, you're wrong, but
All right. So moving on now to the NFL season. NFL season just recently ended here with the playoffs being ultimately determined, which we will be talking about in a little bit. But first, let's kind of talk about some of the disappointments and surprises like we did with the NBA, but for the entire NFL season here. Now, we have a list of teams here that we have kind of picked out that we thought that maybe were some disappointing teams and some surprising teams here. First one I kind of want to talk about here is the Chargers and how they finished 5-12 and fourth in the division. I feel that they drastically underperformed this year. Having people like Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen on the offense, and Khalil Mack, and just I just think that they very much underperformed, and really, I didn't expect them to finish 5-12 this year at all.
yeah, me neither. A lot of it was chalked up to coaching, injuries, and players just underperforming, like Quentin Johnston. He was expected to do a lot, but Herbert just didn't throw to him, and when he did, he dropped it. But that's just like how Devontae Adams started. So I think in a couple years, the Chargers will get their stuff together. I think they'll be a lot better than what they were this year. At least I'd hope so.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of it was coaching, and we did see their head coach be fired. And, we'll have to wait and see who they decide to hire for this, upcoming season. But, I mean, they have pieces to be considered a potential playoff team. But for them to finish 5-12 and finish last in the division, I feel was a very big disappointment for them this year. On the topic of injuries, though, we did list some teams that underperformed, but mainly I would put in the category of due to injury, and those being the Giants, the Vikings, and the Jets. The Vikings and losing Kirk Cousins, and obviously the Jets coming into the season with high expectations with Aaron Rodgers. But for him to get hurt in the first game of the season, and for them to finish 7-10, obviously a disappointment based on where they were projected to finish in the beginning of the season.
I truly believe if Rodgers did not get hurt, we would be seeing them play in the playoffs. And, I think with that defense, they would make a run for the Super Bowl. That team, the the offense was really bad, but I'd chalk that up to mostly quarterback play. They were starting, you know, Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle at quarterback, so they didn't really have a chance. And with bad quarterback play, they had 7 wins. So with Aaron Rodgers, I think they'd get at least 10, maybe more, and they would have won most of the games.
Yeah, I'll be kind of interested to see what they do with this offseason because a lot of the guys that they brought in because of Aaron Rodgers just like did not have any significant impact for the Jets like at all. Like Tim Boyle like didn't work out. Randall Cobb was pretty much like may as well not even like have been on the field. He pretty much wasn't on the field. Alan Lazard was a healthy scratch. They cut Adrian Amos, like at the towards the end or part of the season. So a lot of the former Packers that they had brought to the Jets didn't really have any impact. So are they going to hang on to them? Are they just going to move on from them? I'll be interested to see what they do with that. And we did have one more team on here for disappointment. That was the Jaguars. Only really mainly because they didn't make the playoffs. They kind of blew it at the end of the season there in Week 18. But I don't know. That's kind of the main reason we had them on this list. Some of the surprises, though. Let's talk about some of the surprises. One being the Cleveland Browns, who decided to become good with Joe Flacco. I mean, who had that on their bingo card that Joe Flacco was going to come back and help lead the team to the playoffs?
Yeah, I'm a big Joe Flacco fan, so I'm happy for him, being able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously something I clearly didn't expect, and I'm sure nobody really expected that. Another being the Texans, who with first-year starter C.J. Stroud win their division and make the playoffs as the 4 seed. And, we obviously have to talk about, even though we are Packer fans here, but we do have to talk about the Lions and their 12-5 season and winning the division. They had they had a great year. Unfortunately, they did get a little banged up in their final game of the season. So how much will that impact them in the playoffs? We'll see. But I'm sure that their playoff game in the wild card round it's going to be buzzing in Detroit. It's going to be buzzing at where they play. It's going to be probably a great atmosphere there, and because just of how long they had been away from the playoffs.
And they're playing Matthew Stafford, so that's going to be pretty cool.
And, obviously, like I said, we are Packer fans, so we do have to talk about the Packers finishing 9-8 and getting the last seed. People had wrote us off at the beginning of the year, not expecting us to do well at all, having a top pick in the draft. And at one point, we were in that position. We were not a great team. And I was looking at mock drafts, and a lot of us had us picking, early, like 5th or 6th or 7th or whatever in those. But then, we kind of started seeing them win some games, and they ultimately finished above 500 and made the playoffs with Jordan Love this year, which, again, not a lot of people had expected out of them. A lot of people had thought, that it was going to be a full-on rebuilding year. And in some ways, it is a rebuilding year. But for them to make the playoffs this year, I think, was a big surprise.
Yeah, I didn't think they'd be terrible. Like, some people were predicting us to only win, 3 games. I didn't think we'd be even, like that, but I didn't really expect a playoff berth. I just expected to kind of have a average middle of the road season, and now that we're in the playoffs anything can happen. I don't think they'll win the Super Bowl, but just winning a playoff game will get these young guys on the team some experience in the big games.
Yeah, so keeping on the playoff talk here, I'm sure we might have it on screen for you guys, but we will be showing the seeding and obviously all the matchups here for the first week of the playoffs. Any of these games stick out to you, and you want to make any predictions on any of these games?
Um, some pretty fun games will be Miami versus Kansas City and the Rams versus Detroit, because they have Tyreek Hill facing off against the Chiefs, which will be fun. It'll be Tyreek's return to Arrowhead. And for the Rams in Detroit, Jared Goff faces his former team in the Rams, and Matthew Stafford plays his former team in Detroit. So pretty good drama to have in the playoffs, the first round.
Yeah, on the AFC side, like you had mentioned, I like that Kansas City Miami matchup. I think that will be a pretty good game. And like you said on the NFC side too, really too, like Detroit and the Rams, I think will probably be the best game in the NFC. Um, I mean, Philly and Tampa Bay. Philly's kind of been struggling lately, so who knows? Dallas plays really well at home; they're undefeated. Um, but like you mentioned earlier, it's the playoffs; anything can happen. Cleveland, Houston. Cleveland, Houston might actually be a kind of a sneaky good game. So
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see who comes out on top of that one. And I mean, Buffalo and Pittsburgh. I think Buffalo will win. It was just announced that T.J. Watt won't be playing in that game, so I think Buffalo should win that game. But I also kind of wanted to ask you, besides Baltimore and the 49ers, who on each side do you think would have the best odds on making it to the Super Bowl?
Um, on the NFC, it's either gonna, for best odds, like 'em or hate 'em, Dallas has to be up there because of what they've done this season. Sure, they struggled against the good teams, but you know, if they get their stuff together, you never know what can happen. And Philly too, like they struggled down the stretch, but they'll tush push their way to the Super Bowl. I guess they could. And the AFC, it Cleveland could make a run for it because Joe Flacco in the playoffs is historically like the best quarterback, and he had the best quarterback run in the Super Bowl era with Baltimore. So you never know. I don't think Miami will do it, but realistically, I don't think any team has a chance at stopping Baltimore. I think they're the best team, and that they're my Super Bowl pick, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I do think that both the one seeds are probably the best teams this year. I wouldn't say there's a fluke one seed. Um, I think Baltimore and the 49ers realistically should probably be the Super Bowl matchup, barring any like upset. In terms of the NFC, I agree with you that I think Dallas is probably the biggest threat for the 49ers. And in terms of the AFC, I had heard a lot of people, like you had mentioned also talking about the Browns that could potentially, be that shocker surprise Super Bowl pick or to at least make a run in the playoffs. I could definitely see that with how, like what you mentioned about Joe Flacco and their defense. I mean, the Browns' defense is really, really good. Buffalo down the stretch hasn't been great either, kind of like Philly. So I don't know. We'll see how they do in the playoffs. Miami could make a case, if they have a game where Tyreek Hill, goes off or their running game goes off. It'd be hard to do against the Ravens, but it could happen. But I do think that both one seeds are the favorite and should probably make it to the Super Bowl. But I mean, the playoffs are an entirely different season in itself, and anything can happen. And again, as we mentioned, we are Packer fans, and they are in the playoffs. But a lot of us Packer fans are kind of fed up with our defensive coordinator, Joe Barry, and want a change at defensive coordinator. Talk about the Packers' defensive rankings here. Starting with the total defense, where the Packers ranked 17th. Passing defense, we ranked 9th. Rushing defense was ranked 28th. Scoring defense 10th. Red zone defense 10th. And third down defense 25th. Now, when I first initially searched up these numbers, they weren't as horrible as I had thought in a lot of these categories. Now, obviously, rushing defense is really bad, and third down defense is really bad, but passing defense being 9th, scoring defense 10th, and red zone defense 10th, like, I was not expecting when I searched up these rankings.
Yeah, we've always, recently been historically bad at rushing defense, so that isn't a shocker. Where usually teams always run the ball on us. Like Raheem Mostert ran for like 200 yards in the playoffs against us, so I'm not shocked to see that. But everything else is pretty shocking. Being the 17th best defense out of 32 teams isn't half bad. It's pretty middle of the pack, but it isn't bad.
Yes, and these rankings are coming from Fox Sports website. Just to point that out, I think, I was asked a question. Looking at these rankings, would you still want Joe Barry fired or replaced? And my answer is still yes, because I think it's more about the schemes and the type of defense that he runs in certain situations. Because we've seen countless times where, like, say, Preston Smith is covering like Justin Jefferson, or like they're playing soft prevent defense and allowing them to just drive down the field. So I think that is more the issue that are upsetting a lot of Packer fans, and that is the reason why we want him to be replaced.
Yeah, I think we should go out and get someone that's, a little more aggressive on the defensive end and, like, doesn't really, play that prevent defense exactly when we're up by 2 scores and then the team gets right back in the game. We should have someone that's more, aggressive, not like the stupid aggressive, but like, that just has a better scheme fit for what the players that we have, really.
And the Packers played Carolina this year, and Bryce Young threw for over 300 yards, which I don't know if he did in any other game this year. We made Baker Mayfield have a perfect passer rating and just look amazing out there. So it's just, I don't know. Sometimes the defense plays really well, and then sometimes they just completely suck. And I don't know. It's got to be coaching. I mean, the Packers have a ton of first-round picks on that defense, and I don't know. It's the only thing I can think of is that it's coaching. I mean, for the past couple of years, they've been, my opinion, bottom of the barrel defense, and it's time for a change. With the amount of talent that they have on defense, we need somebody who's going to be able to utilize that talent. So I don't know. I hope that they pull the trigger and get rid of him, and I hope I hope that they don't keep him because I'm sure a lot of Packer fans are going to be very upset if they do decide to keep him. I mean, like I had mentioned, some of these they might look at some of these, rankings and say that he did, a good enough job to keep his job, but I don't know. I think sometimes you can be blinded by the rankings and not see like because playing prevent defense and having like I said, Preston Smith on Justin Jefferson or whatever doesn't show up in the ranking.
Yeah.
So so like they got to be able to like what's the word I'm looking for? They got to be able to differentiate from what the stats say in the rankings and like what they're actually seeing on the field with the
Yes.
calls that he's making. All right, so last but not least, let's talk about college football season that is also just recently wrapped up, where we saw Michigan defeat Washington 34-13. Now, what were your opinions on the game?
I realistically I didn't care who won. I liked both teams. And Washington couldn't stop them. They couldn't move down the field. And when they did something stupid with a penalty or just, missing open shots, you know. But other than that, I think the better team won that night. And I don't know, good for Michigan being able to finally win a title after being a top tier team for the past couple years.
Yeah, out of the four that were in the college football playoff this year, I did want Washington to win just because I don't like Alabama, I don't like Michigan, so I wanted somebody like Washington to win. I would have taken Texas too, but I don't know. Washington was my pick. Washington, like you said, just didn't play good. Penix didn't really have one of his better games, and Michigan just kind of ran away with it. To be honest, I will give them their flowers. Congrats to Michigan for finally getting over that hump and winning after the last couple of seasons. Not being able to get to that. But I don't know. I mean, I've seen a lot of people say that it was a good game. So I mean, you can't really complain about that. If your team isn't in it and you just want to watch a good football game, that's really really good. In terms of Michigan, obviously, there's a lot of rumors of potentially Jim Harbaugh coming back to the NFL to become a head coach. Do you think that that is going to happen, or do you think he's going to be sticking with Michigan?
Um, I could see it happen either way, but now that he finally won a title in at the college level, I could see him leaving to the NFL now, and especially with a whole bunch of coaching openings this year, I can totally see him leaving and coming back, finish the job at the pro level, you know, see what he can do.
Yeah, obviously he's a name that over the past couple of seasons has always been in the conversation for him to to go to the NFL and become a head coach. And obviously, he's stuck with Michigan. And now that he's won the national championship with them, I think it would be as perfect time as any to become a head coach for an NFL team after this year. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of people, think that maybe he'd go to the Chargers. I've seen some people maybe say to the Commanders. So, I mean, I'm sure, it won't be long before he ultimately makes his decision. We may see him take interviews and ultimately decide to stay. So, I don't know. But I think if he's going to do it, like now would be probably the perfect time to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Well, did you want to mention anything else? Do you have anything else to add?
I think we talked about everything that we really wanted to talk about. I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, that's where we're going to end episode 3 of the LolFish podcast. If you guys did enjoy this podcast episode, please consider clicking that like button and, even leave a comment. Give us any comments on what you liked about the podcast episode, what you didn't like. Any comments on anything that we talked about throughout the episode would be greatly appreciated. If you guys want to share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. That would be much appreciated, and we would thank you for that so much. And with that, I'm LolFish. I'm joined by Local Central, and we will see you guys in the next podcast episode.